Alright, the title of this video is a little bit clickbaity, but what I'm about to say is very true. So, been using the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K, that's a mouthful, for the past 2 weeks shooting a short docu-series, and we've been using it side by side with the GH5S, which has been around for almost a year. And there is quite a bit to not like about this Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera. So I know there's gonna be a lot of hate comments, but let's dive right into it. Number one is the screen. The screen on the back of this thing is large, it's great, it's touch screen, but if you ever try to shoot above eye level, you try to shoot below eye level, and it is damn near impossible to get any sort of focus peaking on it. You do need a separate monitor or display to really use this thing. Which brings me up to the second reason why this camera kind of sucks. Even though people talk about it being $1,300 and that's a great price for what it delivers, you really do need to rig it up. So you throw in a rig that's about $200, you throw in an external monitor that's anywhere from $200 to $500, and you really do need some sort of external battery. That's going to be point number 3. But once you get even just the essentials, which are an external monitor and a rig, you're already up to around the same price as a GH5S. So price really is negated by the time you have this thing ready to go, ready to shoot. Number 3. The battery life. The battery life on this thing is absolutely horrendous. Yes, you can use LPE6 batteries, but you have to use either the OEM ones from Blackmagic or you have to use the original ones from Canon. That will set you back at least $40 to $50 a battery, and at 30 minutes to 45 minutes of runtime, you're looking at least maybe 10 batteries before you can even have a full day or maybe even a 3/4 day shoot. That's another $400 or so. You rack all that up, this thing is not a $1,300 camera. Ready to shoot, it's closer to $2,000. All right, point number 4, we're gonna talk about image quality. The image quality on this is great, but there are a number of videos comparing it to the GH5S, to the GH5. I believe the 5S is really more similar to it in image quality, and honestly, you'd have to really pixel peep to really notice the difference. You'll also notice that there's a massive magenta shift when you get into the highlights, when images are blown out. That is a big problem with this BMPCC 4K, and it's something that you really have to watch out when you're shooting. So image quality wise, it's not a drastic difference. All these comparisons to an RE or to a Red, those are completely unfounded. I will do a separate video where I will compare it to a UMP and to one of our Red bodies, and you'll see that this, although it's great, is really not much different in picture quality than a GH5S. And the one stop of dynamic range difference that everyone talks about, which is really closer to 0.7 or 0.8 stops, if you're lighting your scene from dark to bright and you really need all 13 stops and you're clipping or you have shadow detail that's gone, that means that you're not lighting the scene properly. And in that case, that's more the operator than it is the camera. So yes, you might get a little less than 1 extra stop of dynamic range, but in terms of overall picture quality, this is the same exact sensor in the GH5S. You're gonna get a very similar image quality, and that really does not give it enough, I think, of an advantage when you're talking about all the other disadvantages on this. Point number 5, audio. This is a major issue for me because the audio inputs on the Blackmagic, although they offer a 3.5mm and a mini XLR with phantom power, the actual preamps that are built into this are absolutely horrible. The noise floor is really high, and even if you were to plug in something like a external boom or shotgun onto the mini XLR, you're not going to get enough audio amplification, and you're really going to need an external recorder or an external preamp from like Saramonic or from Zoom. In that case, you're adding another few $100, you're having to rig it up, and this becomes much larger than it already is. So right out of the box, The audio on this really just does not fly. You really have to just pull everything up to almost 100%, and like I said, your noise floor just gets really noisy and it's just unusable. So it does need some sort of external audio. Point number 6, the censored 120p. So when this thing needs to shoot in 120 frames a second or super slow-mo, you end up getting this very, very, very small portion of the sensor, and that's probably just because of the processing power that this camera has. Although it can handle Cinema DNG RAW right now, and it can do ProRes, and that's great. But when you have to shoot in super slow-mo, you end up with something that's 4 times cropped, and that means that you can't shoot super slow-mo in low light, and 2, your lens choices just drastically are reduced if you're trying to shoot something like a wide angle slow-mo. And that is really not that acceptable for something like this. They should offer a full sensor readout, maybe in a different codec. Very last thing that I have a gripe about with this camera is the fact that there is a major quality control issue right now. This has already been RMA'd once because it kept on shutting down and it would not replay clips. It would essentially show that maybe there were 30 clips on the card, but it would only play 15 of them. So Blackmagic had to go ahead and replace this camera once. I think if you're going to have to rely on this in a scenario where you only have one chance to shoot something, this is not the camera to use, not currently and not in its current iteration of firmware. I think that this is something that people should wait for. So given all of that, I believe there is something here. It's maybe a great alpha product, but currently it's not something that I can highly recommend that a filmmaker rely on. All right, so now that we're done kind of bashing on the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema 4K, let's talk about the few things that it is good at. The fact that it shoots ProRes in camera is amazing. This means that you do not have to create proxy files. There's no transcoding for hours at night on your computer. This thing, straight out of camera, you can shoot and edit right away. That's really great. Number 2 is the fact that it supports RAW. Although the current iteration of RAW, which is Cinema DNG, is a real pain in the ass to work with, until they allow it to shoot B-RAW or Blackmagic RAW, I think that, I don't know, I wouldn't use it personally. Maybe if you have a specific project, it would work for you. Those are 2 great pros for it, but other than that, this is really not a camera that I would highly recommend for someone who's doing a docu-series or run and gun, or really needs a highly reliable camera and doesn't need many accessories to shoot straight out of the box. Now, let me offer you an alternative, the GH5S. This camera solves many of the issues that I think the Blackmagic 4K has. For one, it's got a monitor that flips out. Sure, it's a lot smaller, but it offers a lot of the same features. Some may say the focus peaking is not as easy to use, but you know what? You got an EVF. And an EVF is something that comes in handy when it's bright out and you don't need an external monitor when you're shooting on the GH5S. The price. Some will say this is about $700 more than the BMPCC 4K. However, it comes with a lot of other items on it that the BMPCC 4K doesn't, namely the screen. You don't need a cage, you don't need an external monitor. That alone, between those 2 items, already makes up more or less for the price. Number 3, the battery issue. The battery on this lasts a long time. You can shoot on this for around 3 to 4 times the length that you would be able to shoot on a Blackmagic's Pocket Cinema 4K. So that means that you're using 4 times less batteries, and you can use third-party batteries which cost significantly less. So you're going to save a lot of money just on the batteries alone. Now let's talk about the image quality. The image quality of the GH5S is more or less exactly the same as the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K. You're not going to notice that less than 1 stop of dynamic range difference. And if you want to go and use an external recorder like the Atomos 5, you can, and you will end up with that ProRes. You will end up with 10-bit in 60p, and you will be able to shoot in a much higher quality codec if you don't like the 400 megabit all-eye codec that they have on the GH5S. But for all intents and purposes, the image quality is very, very, very similar. There's numerous videos on the internet. You can go and pixel peep there. I'm not going to do it here, but you know, more or less, you're talking about minute differences in the image quality. It's more the filmmaker and the user than it is the camera itself. Let's talk about audio inputs. This is one of the biggest strengths of the GH5 and the GH5S, is that you can get this. Now this is the XLR1 input, and what it allows is you to put a hot shoe XLR mount on top of the GH5 and GH5S. That gives you two full-size XLR inputs. Let's also talk about the audio. This is one of the most important features, benefits, pros of the GH5S. You can get yourself the XLR1, which some will complain at $400 is expensive, but if you're looking at XLR inputs on something like a red body or maybe, I don't know, something like an ARRI, you're looking at thousands of dollars for that type of module. So for $400, for you to be able to put in two balanced XLR inputs, full size, and put them directly into the video file through the hot shoe on this camera, that is incredible. It also has automatic control of both lines so that you don't clip. You don't need a separate audio person. That means you can be a single shooter crew and you can shoot documentaries, running guns. And unless you're not using audio, which I know some of you do, maybe audio is not something that you use. Maybe you're just shooting stuff with music in the background that you're doing in post. But if you need audio, the GH5S has a big benefit in that respect. Next up is quality issues. The quality on the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K is definitely not that great yet. This is well documented not only on multiple websites such as DVX, such as Reddit, but you'll see that a lot of people have been RMAing their cameras because they've just been having issues with them. The GH5S is sturdy, it's solid, it's weatherproof. You can shoot it in the rain, you can drop the thing and it'll probably still work. Can't say the same thing for the Blackmagic yet. And reliability goes a long way when your project needs to get somewhere and needs to get done at a certain time and you have to rely on your equipment. And the last point that the GH5S solves that the BMPCC 4K lacks is it doesn't require you to do censored 120p. That means that you can shoot in low light with this thing at extremely slow motion. And that is an incredible thing that most cameras can't do even at 4 times the cost. Given all that, the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K, it is great for a few certain things. I believe maybe for some of you filmmakers who have very controlled environments, who maybe have an extra crew, who need to rig up the entire camera, or just have larger budgets, I believe this is the camera for you. But in most circumstances, if you just need something that works, that provides at least 9/10 of the picture quality and allows you so many different options in terms of audio input and reliability and slow-mo, you gotta go with a GH5S. This is hotly debated on the internet, but having shot both of these for a few weeks and having owned both of them, I will say that the GH5S really is, for right now, the better choice for the majority of people who are looking at purchasing one of these two. Hope you enjoyed this review. Click, sub, don't sub, hate, whatever you want. I hope you learned something new.